welcome to the SimplyTrade News Roundup, your go-to podcast really for all your trade news. Welcome back. It's Monday if you're listening on the day this comes out. If you're not, then, it's still relevant because it's actually happening. Everything that we're talking about is happening right now, but could change any second. So whether you're listening to this on Monday, we're recording on Friday, the Friday before this day, things might change, and that is not on us, unfortunately. But first, I want to recap the biggest trade news in the industry that happened, which is President Trump has announced 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, set to take effect in mid-March, potentially impacting really $3.1 billion worth of European metal exports. The U.S. is pushing for European NATO members to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP, up from the current 2% target, which will affect the European Union mostly. Trump has imposed a 10% additional tariff on Chinese imports, which he said he's imposing 10%. I'm not sure if he knew that there's already 10% on there. But yeah, it's 10% additional to the 10%. So technically it's 20% now, happening March 4th. Not hopefully, but that's what we are expecting on Chinese imports, and temporarily he suspended a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican goods, but they are supposed to go into effect March 4th as well. There's a lot of news. Again, this could change, but now we are going into something that we have not talked about, and we have a special guest on that we have had on before. He's a trade compliance specialist, really based in Europe, so he can give us all the details, because today we're talking a little bit more about the European Union and U.S. relations and what is going on, because Trump obviously also has proposed reciprocal tariffs, and as well as 25% tariffs. We have already established that. So, no further information right now. Kyle Grobler, we have him here in the virtual studio. Really, thank you for coming. I am really excited to have you here, because I could have not talked about this myself, because I need someone that can have a little more intel and specialty in this area. So welcome, and how are you today?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's Friday today. By Monday, everything could look completely different, right? So please don't shoot the messenger if the message changed by the time this is released. You kind of hit it, quite likely. Trump has really come forward with some of the things he had said that had a lot of people scrambling and still scrambling, rightfully so. The 25% with the US, with Canada and Mexico, and then it was the 25% on steel and aluminium for everyone. So that's not only Canada or Mexico; it's whoever is supplying with steel and aluminium, which is a massive hit for almost every industry that I've spoken to. So that I have friends and colleagues that are in the aerospace sector. They're being hit with it. I have friends that work in IKEA that are being hit with it, right? So really, like, when you think of steel and aluminium, some people are like, oh, well, my products don't, but like your products probably do. There's somewhere in the supply chain or somewhere in your process where these items are going to be affected and impacted. So that in and itself is massive. There's no way around that whatsoever, from at least my knowledge and a lot of other people. So now, your fully landed cost goes up 25% on those products. And now the question becomes, okay, do we pass it on to the customer, right? So that would be ultimately the US customer. So you guys are living in the USA, used to buy something for, I don't know, call it X amount. Now it's X plus 25%, right? So given the current economies and how economies are going, I travel quite a lot for work as well. And the one thing that I've seen globally is that people can't afford to pay more. People are already stretched, right? So, how this is going to impact, global economies, the US economy, I think is still yet to be decided and seen. But I think everyone needs to brace themselves. Yeah, I not really much more I can give on that. From a like a mitigation point of view, we can't really mitigate that for the steel and aluminium. The only alternative is you bring your manufacturing in-house, right? So meaning in the USA. That's the only real way you can mitigate paying those. And I'm willing to be corrected on that front.
Yeah, which could ultimately make it more expensive at that point too, because labor is more expensive.
Also, then what the local manufacturer does says, okay, there's a gap in the market. Instead of it being lower, I'm going to increase it by the 25% because I want to make more money. So now it gives now your local market gets to set the price. And because you can't source it from China, because it's going to be 25% more, or from the EU or from South Africa, it's going to be 25% more. So some manufacturers, you will get the one or two manufacturers that say, hey, look, in the benefit of the people, we're not going to inflate our costs. But then you're also going to get those other manufacturers who are going to do it. And if I put my business hat on, like, I think I might too, right? Or you can understand why people might want to adjust it for more profits. It is unfortunate that businesses focus on profit more than people, and that's just something that we have to take as a reality. And then the news after that, which kind of hits, I think it was on Wednesday or Tuesday, that Trump is introducing 25% tariff on all EU goods. I just think there's something that we have to note here as well, that just because your goods are coming from the EU, Mexico, or Canada doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be hit with 25%. These are goods that have origin, EU origin, Mexican origin, Canadian origin, that are going to be hit with 25%. So you can have a good that you're bringing in, let's say, from Japan into Ireland, and you might just do something like simple packaging and then exporting it to the USA. It's not going to get hit with that 25%. But the EU origin goods will be hit with the 25%. So I think that's just something also important to remember. If your supply chain is, heavily revolved and has manufacturing in Mexico, and you guys are importing goods to Mexico, and it goes to just simple packing into a box, that doesn't necessarily change the origin from, let's say, India to Mexico. And you'll be safeguarded from paying that 25%. So it's just something to keep in mind. So if you guys are importing materials, it's probably a very good time to look at origin, right? You should have already been looking at origin already. But if you haven't, maybe now is a better time to just invest in some of those, minimal operations that you guys are having globally, whether it be in Canada, Mexico, or the EU, just to reassess. Like, does the good meet the requirements for changing of origin? And I think that's an amazing, because you're going to pay 25% more. And I'll be honest with you, there has been times in organizations that I've been in where we've uploaded our master data. We've just said that that's the country of origin, because like that's where the master. So if the master data was updated in Ireland and we added a SKU to it, the master data team would just automatically say that good is of Irish origin, which is wrong.
I was going to say, is that even right? That doesn't seem right.
It's not right at all. It's not right at all. So like, obviously there's a massive education piece. And this is the thing, like, we're human, we make mistakes, and sometimes like logic escapes us, because sometimes the master data people don't really think, okay, well, how does origin affect my customer, us as a supplier, and etc. So these are just things like I think it's definitely worth investigating. Investigate your origin. Is your origin true and accurate? Does it go past just simple, packaging, labeling? Because if it doesn't go past that, then you probably have a benefit of availing of the actual origin of the goods. And origin in itself is an extremely complex topic. So it's definitely worth investing your time and your resources in that if you want to try and mitigate it and see if there's any gap there.
Well, this is a perfect time for me to give it a little advertisement, because Global Training Center actually has a country of origin course. It's a half-day course, perfect for anyone that really wants to get into that topic. But anyways, I don't want to spend much time on that. You mentioned that it is going to be on the consumer in the US, correct? Like the 25%. If the 25% of tariffs are going to be put on European companies, they're going to pass that on most likely to the US consumer. Most likely, depending on whether they want to, like the companies want to do that or not. But how does that depend? Well, I would say, knowing US and Europe, the US people seem to have a little more of a spending problem than Europeans. I think Europeans are a little more reserved, while in the US nature is more to spend. I mean, we see this credit cards, in Europe, or at least in Germany, we don't like to have credit. Now, if you don't have credit, I mean, I don't know if it is like that in Ireland, but that's how it is in Germany. You can't really buy things if you have a high credit, because they're like, you can't even pay off this. How are you going to pay off this? Whatever. And I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's how that country works. But in the US, if you have a lot of credit, it's good. And if you have a high credit score, which is you're paying off your credit gradually and you're not missing payments, that's a really good thing. And you can probably buy a house and you'll get better credit, whatever. That's why if you don't have credit here, it sucks. But now I'm thinking, okay, so the US consumer seems like they're still going to buy, but how does it really affect European companies in that sense? Let's say the US consumer would buy.
Yeah, great question. So now it decreases their ability to compete in the US market, because now their goods have gone up 25%. So now you're paying 25% more. So now their competition is going to be less. And then obviously if people don't want to spend higher, they can go for the competition. But again, like, some companies will pass the expense onto the consumer. Some companies might do like a shared thing where they might absorb some of it in their profit margin. So their margin's a little bit smaller, so they can be more competitive in the US market. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And I think it's going to be organization dependent, industry dependent, and company dependent on how they're going to manage that additional 25%. But ultimately it makes European suppliers less competitive in the USA, because now their goods are officially going up by 25%. So if their goods aren't going up 25%, their margin is going to drastically shrink, right? So if they had a 25% margin, now they have a 0% margin. So maybe some of that was going to have to be passed on to the customer. I'm just using very simple numbers so the audience can, obviously understand.
So that's a good point. But if the EU, because right now, currently, everyone seems to kind of take whatever the US is doing. I mean, we see Mexico kind of fighting back in a little. That's why it got pushed back to 25%. Scheinbaum, she's been very loud and vocal about what she wants, and that she wants to have good relations with the US, and that it's not necessary to have these retaliatory tariffs. What is the EU going to do?
Yeah, I think, I think there's a few things, like priority negotiations. I mean, there's still in a period here for negotiations, and I think the EU would be very strong, to negotiate. But the EU has also said, if what you do to me, I'm also going to do to you, right? So the USA also exports a lot to the EU, which will also affect a lot of USA suppliers, manufacturers, and businesses as well. So it's almost a game of tit for tat, kind of like what Mexico was doing in Canada. Like, okay, if you're going to put 25%, we're going to do 25% as well, right? And I think Mahatma Gandhi said it best: an eye for an eye makes the entire world blind.
So a trade war would probably not be the best thing here.
Yeah, I mean, there's been the political party says we have to have unity, right? We have to have unity by maintaining and ensuring all member states support the overall response. So again, it's a member state by member state. They'll probably all throw their opinions and etc. into a hat, and they'll have to come to a general consensus. I mean, if the WTO says, if negotiations fail, the EU could file a complaint with the World Trade Organization to challenge the legality of the US tariffs. And that's something that's completely out of my realm, but that is something that, I have seen flying around about if this, then that.
Yeah, it's funny. I just saw a post on LinkedIn actually about the WTO, and someone made a comment and said, it was not made for me. Okay, guys, don't come for me. But it said WTO, and the T does not stand for Trump, because he's making all these changes and regulations and blah blah blah, and it seems like there is nothing else that can come his way right now. I've also seen that. So the UK, in this sense, you might be more familiar because you're right there. Seems to want to make closer ties with the US, which obviously everyone kind of wants to do that, but I feel like that might take them further away from these European countries like Germany, Italy or whatever. Do you know anything on that?
Yeah. So that's a great topic. So as soon as I posted that post about the EU tariffs, when I found out about it, a lot of questions came in. Was, oh, what about the UK? What about the UK? And to that point, it seems that the US administration and the UK government have like a far better cordial relationship, because Trump's going over there. He's been invited over there, like as we discussed earlier.
Loves the UK. I don't know. It has something to do with his mother, but he's like loves.
Okay. So, I mean, he's going over there and like they're talking like I think Trump said in not so many words that the UK has taken advantage of the USA, but I think he's said that about a lot of countries as well. But he also said that he's looking forward to striking a good negotiation with them. And don't quote me on that, but basically summarizing it, that's what he said. But he wasn't saying, we're going to put 25% on you guys, right? So he did say, hey, you guys have been abusing us a bit, but I'm excited to negotiate with you guys. But he didn't say that about the EU. He just said, hey, 25%, Mexico 25%, Canada 25%, So, and regardless of his reasoning, he with all of those 25%, Canada, Mexico, and EU, he didn't say, and I'm willing to stand corrected here, as, oh, hey, it's looking promising, we're going to strike a deal. He was like, hey, it's 25%. And his demeanor and the words that he's used with the UK have been far different than these other three countries that I mentioned.
Yeah, well, the UK is really trying. The prime minister just came and handed him a letter, and he read it, or he said it's from the king and he's inviting you to dinner, and it's unprecedented. He's never done that before. Of course, they need to take, and I was listening. I love to listen to one of the another news podcast. And they were saying how kind of genius it was to do, because obviously it's going to make him feel like just, he likes to feel empowered, and that's exactly how they're making him feel. And granted, he does have a lot of power right now. I mean, he's doing things that no one really has done before. So there is a lot of power. And then, we come to the Ukraine, which is a huge problem for Europe, or has been, because Europe has been spending trillions of dollars putting into the Ukraine. And I know that I'm not educated in that, but the oil energy situation is also not looking great for Europe, and it hasn't been for a while. So talking on that, the France I don't even know if the prime minister, I don't know what they call him, but he was recently at the White House, and they were talking, and Trump was like, yeah, we're getting back, US is getting back the money that they invested into Ukraine to fight this war. And then he said, and Europe is kind of doing, France or Europe is doing the same thing. And then the French, the leader said, wait, I'm going to have to stop you right there. He said it in the interview. He said, I'm going to have to stop you right there, because we're not getting back the money. Like, we're not getting back this money. Oh, he's like, and then Trump said, if you think so.
You hit on something like that like really, like, so I am big into like communication and how can we effectively articulate ourselves, and how can we, get people to buy into how we do it by the words we use, the gestures that we use. And I think I think the letter like really stroked his ego.
Yeah. It's like, great. Okay. Let's make
come on
25% for everyone but the UK. That's what he's going to say. 25% but the UK.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Nice.
But from a compliance standpoint, what do you think? Like, how can you prepare as being in compliance in Europe per se? How do you prepare yourself? How do you stay like vigilant to what is going to happen? How do you currently, you have to do your everyday due diligence, but like you're still having to think about the future and what could potentially happen, what is not currently happening, but what you might have to look forward to, correcting or changing or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. I think like that question in itself, we could probably speak for hours on in itself. I always try to be as proactive as I can in my day-to-day, my strategic thinking. So for me, the only thing that has now changed is there is some additional costs that we have to calculate, right? So like that, it's doing a full and complete cost analysis. How much is this going to cost us, right? From a duty perspective, how much is this going to impact our fully landed cost? How is that going to affect our margin? How are we going to absorb this cost? Are we going to absorb it? Are we going to try share it between our suppliers, our customers, our service providers, so it doesn't affect the customer that much? Or are we just having to pass this on to the customer, right? So there's lots of very thoughtful, strategic conversations going. But from a proactive point of view, I mean, if you're not being proactive in trade, like, just start today. Like, start being proactive. Start, like, look at your origin, look at your classification, do the numbers. I mean, there's nothing worse than that knee-jerk reaction. And I think now more than ever, companies, suppliers, manufacturers, anyone that's involved in global trade needs to be proactive. We have to be proactive now more than ever. I also believe that the USA is going to be scrutinizing absolutely everything that's coming in. So importers in the USA, be prepared. Make sure your valuation is correct. Make sure your origin is correct. Your classification is correct. But I'm saying this now, but you should have already been doing that. Your origin should have already been correct. Your classification should already be. So it really shouldn't come as much of a surprise to you. But now more than ever, be vigilant, be proactive, ask the questions, get your processes in place. And really just rev up, your trade compliance.
And we'll see what will happen, because nothing, I mean, except for the 25% on steel and aluminum, we are quite not sure what will happen, and we're unsure, especially with Canada and Mexico as well. It's like a waiting game, right?
But the difficulty becomes in, so let's say you're importing a product, right? And it has 17 different items. Let's keep it simple. There's 2 different items, but the predominant item isn't steel, but there's steel in there. How are you going to show that, like, on a commercial invoice? So now you have to break down your commercial invoice to say, hey, the product was 200, but of the 200, I have $20 of it is steel. So do you have to, now you're going to have to show 2 lines. So 180 was, let's say, I don't know, plastic, and then $20 is steel. Like, companies are now going to have, it's going to be a very difficult task. It's not going to be easy. So if anyone has any creative solutions around that, please let me know. I would love to hear what you have to say.
Next week, we're going to be at the ICPA conference in Orlando. When the episode comes out, of course, we'll be recording, guys. Don't worry. It'll come out Monday, and we'll be at the conference. If you are there, let us know. Come say hi. The SimplyTrade podcast will be there, and I will be there. I have not been in 2 years in the United States, so that will be a fun thing to meet a lot of these listeners, as well as, people that have been on the show. So again, thank you, and thank you for listening. Subscribe, do all the things, and follow us on LinkedIn and get in contact with us. Okay, so have a great week.